All right, welcome everyone to the Klazar podcast. It is here where we talk about actionable insights on SaaS GTM, revenue for SaaS companies, and stuff like that through experts that we bring onto the podcast. And today we have such an expert with us, and I'm super excited to have this conversation with him. Rohan, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to chat today.
Thank you. And Rohan, why don't let's start with, your introduction a little bit, tell our audience what you do, what your profile, how you got into partnerships, all the good stuff.
Sure. So I'm probably going to show my age through this introduction, but or at least the feeling of my age. But I am the global head of partnerships at Pigment. It's a SaaS company in the business planning or enterprise performance management space. I've been here for just over a year. I actually began my career in the consulting world, so at Accenture for almost 7 years. Did varying large scale programs there and worked very closely with leadership on the PMO and financial management aspects of those very large implementations and programs. And then joined a company named Zuroa, which is a leader in the subscription billing revenue automation space back in 2015. And over there, I kind of had two stints. So for about 5 years, I did professional services work as well as leadership roles in ProServe, and then got into partnerships after Zora went public, and then really made the determination they wanted to invest in partnerships, both to drive down the overall percentage of revenue that was represented by professional services, but also see partnerships as a growth lever to drive top line growth as well. So did that for about 8 years total at Zora, 5 years ProServe, 3 years partnerships, and tremendous learning and experience during that time. But I had this itch and desire for a global head of partnerships role to be able to really bring my own vision to partnerships and kind of start early on from the ground up. And that's what brought me to Pigment, and it's been very, very exciting thus far.
That's awesome. Well, that's a fantastic background, and I have so many questions I want to ask and dig really deeper into it. But before, Rohan, we had a conversation just before this podcast. Like both of us are huge fans of Kobe. I see that jersey behind you. So just walk us through a little bit about, what got you to be a fan, and what are some of your interesting experiences with him.
Yeah, so I moved to the US, to Southern California, when I was 14 years old from Australia. And that was the year that the Lakers were playing the Philadelphia 76ers and Allen Iverson in the finals. So I had just started to play basketball before that in Australia, but watching that finals, I got hooked. I got hooked onto Kobe right then, and it was Kobe Shaq. So you had to pick a side if you were in LA in those days. I was definitely in the Kobe camp. And then just over the course of adjusting to the states and playing basketball, just learned so much from watching how he approached the game, and that's really translated into a lot of how I tried to approach and challenge myself in my career. Although at best, I'm a shadow of the kind of work ethic that man brought to his sport and his craft. But if I can do 60% of what he did, I think, or at least that work ethic, I think I'll do great things. So I think that was where it all came from. I actually had the opportunity to meet Kobe. As my mom owned and operated a math tutoring center in the town next to his. And for 2 summers, he had his kids coming there. So I got the opportunity to meet him, get a picture with him, which was a once in a lifetime experience. It was very cool.
Once in a lifetime, indeed. I wish I had an opportunity, but I wasn't as lucky.
Yeah.
Cool, awesome. All right, so now let's actually start beginning at the beginning of your career with Zuora, right? Zuora decided to double down on partnerships soon after they went public. Actually, different companies do it differently. Like Zuora decided that perhaps for some reason like they had enough before the IPO. This is actually a strong testament to how it can be strategic a value multiplier for different companies. But generally thinking, Rohan, when do you think it is most appropriate time for businesses to start building a team around partnerships, alliances, and all the good stuff?
Early, early, early. I would say no later than Series B is the ideal starting point. And and not to misrepresent Zora, so they did definitely have technology integrations and some partnerships around that, but I would say it was less go to market focused historically. But really, the focus around growth and scale in partnerships came around their consulting partner motion, which was post IPO. And while there was a lot of success we had in that, in my mind, there was also a lot of friction throughout the organization because you had a 13-year-old company that
Mm,
was used to just doing things without partners involved. And so now to try to come in and build that DNA across the organization and do it across every function is very, very difficult. Whereas you contrast that with Pigment, I look at our co founders here who are visionaries in terms of investing so heavily in partnerships so early. I think my team is 15 in a company of 350 people and going up to over 20 this year. And for them to have that vision to invest so early in the company's journey has allowed me and my team the opportunity to really work across the org and very closely build that interconnectivity. So, really strong relationship with professional services, obviously heavily embedded with sales, deeply integrated with the product organization, and that continues to grow over time. Even marketing, right, spends so many cycles figuring out things like attribution and how do you drive motions with partners, and also even the BDR org, which typically you won't see a lot of collaboration between partner orgs and BDR orgs. We're spending a lot of time with them too, and our growth team as well. So I think when the company's smaller, one, you have the opportunity to do that just because there's less people, but I think also you have the opportunity to now build these partner centric foundations in every other part of the organization from the early days. And it's been an honor and a great opportunity to be able to do that at Pigment.
that's fantastic. So Rohan, like, help us unpack a little bit more on the previous journey at Zora, where it wasn't a quote unquote channel first company, I'm guessing, but then they made a fantastic transition. What walk us through the transition? What worked? What are some of the learnings there?
Yeah, so they really started in earnest down this motion in 2020. And so, funny enough, we just started this consulting partner motion, and then COVID lockdown hits. And if you think about partnerships, it's very much relation or founded in relationships that you have to build and maintain and are rooted in trust over time.
Yep.
And we were entering into this COVID lockdown, trying to sell a vision on partnerships with partners who were signed on with on paper with us in the past, but our professional services organization had competed with and taken business away from. So there was a
Mm,
lot of hesitation, I would say, from the partners. But over that first year, we were really able to reestablish trust and show them that we were serious about really partnering with them. The second year, we started to see conversion of pipeline that we had built in the first year, and we started to see some partners actually hit successive wins in a row. And so
mm,
now they're seeing a real business case around Zora, and that included some GSIs as well. And then third year, it was just about getting more partners successful and scaling some of the success we had in year two. And so over that 3 year period that I was there leading North America partnerships, I think we went from almost zero partner attachment, almost zero partner sourced ops to then I think 30+% of our bookings in that 2023 year was actually sourced by partners. So just, quite a journey going from 0 to 1 or 0 to 2 over there. But at the same time, along the way, there was so much friction along the way, right? You had sales reps who had never had to sell with partners, were just used to bringing in the services org, and that seemed faster and cheaper. You had a services org that was very large, like 300 plus employees at the time we decided to go into the partner motion as a public company with revenue pressure. And so there was a lot of conflicting not motivations there, and that they have to drive a bookings and a revenue number, but at the same time they're trying to support this partner motion, and those two are at odds with each other at
mm.
many times. And so that's where you'd see these sources of frictions creep up in the organization. And just given the size of the org and the things we had to do, I would say we barely even scratched the surface on being able to make inroads with marketing or BDR or some of the other orgs.
Interesting, very interesting. And this actually uncovers the other topic that I wanted to talk about, right? Like, partners are always walking a strategic tightrope where, balancing between the objectives of revenue growth and helping their partner succeed in a generic partnership, if you talk about. How do you rationalize some of the objectives in a manner that ensures business growth while also supporting your partner's success? How do you walk that tightrope that I just talked about?
You're right. It's a balance because the partnerships game is a long one. And so there's an element of education, both with your leadership, but you need the leadership support to do it and then to educate down and through the org. But with that, I think you have a responsibility as a leader in partnerships to also hold yourself accountable for how you define and measure
Mm,
success along the way. Because I'm sure there are partner orgs out there where you set that expectation and 3 years go by and your C-suite's not seeing the results. There's a lag effect, right? And so I think, fortunately, given the space Pigment is in, we very much are data driven. That's what we help companies with. And so we have a lot of KPIs we measure on the partnerships front, and I look at it probably on a daily basis, maybe more than I should sometimes. And so we really try to define what success looks like quantifiably, but also there's a qualitative element to it as well. But even those can be turned into OKRs or measurements or kind of milestones you have to show success against. And so I just take the approach of constant communication and education throughout the org so that leadership's aware of the progress we're making towards an end goal and where our struggles are, but then also being able to articulate the impact we're having. And I think that to do that successfully, yes, you need to think about scale. You need to have the right resources like partner operations to do that. At the same time, you really need a team that's determined to drive
mm,
impact and results in the short term. And you have to constantly find that balance and kind of keep the equilibrium between impact and scale.
mm. And like 100% agree with you on that. And I think the a couple of things that I want to just pull on. One is, we've learned while building Klazar, like, pretty much all the things boil down to having a fantastic team in place. Nothing is beyond that. And if you have that, and if you provide the right coaching, mentorship, and support, then great things can happen. And then the other thing that I wanted to pull on is, you talked about leadership and that alignment. Like, most sales leaders believe that partner attached deals are at least, say, 26 to 50% more likely to be won on an average, right? How do you think the sales leaders can integrate partnerships into their deal cycles to achieve this maximum efficiency? Let's say if I'm a sales leader listening to this podcast, and I'm sitting somewhere like 5 to 10% range, but I'm looking at this 26 to 50% range. How do I get there? What kind of process do I go through?
Yeah, so I've seen this done masterfully at Pigment by a number of our sales leaders. Almost to the point here where sometimes I have to reel back the AE and sales leader energy with partners and say, hey, there's a wider strategy here that we also need to manage and balance. So just
Mm,
work through our team as well. But hey, love that you're creating scale with partnerships by building your own relationships. And so I think, look, ultimately the partnership org has to define the strategy. They have to qualify and bring on the right partners. They have to put them through enablement. They have to get the field enabled on the partner's relative strengths, and they have to create the right box for the partner to play and succeed in within your organization or your go to market. But when you think about the sales organization, I think one, you need to have close interconnectivity between the sales organization and their partner managers or the partner org or whoever their kind of conduit is
mm,
into the partner org, and really tight teaming at that level. I think another example is like we have a very open dialogue with our sales leaders and reps where they bring us ideas or, hey, I've worked with this partner before and they were really good at XYZ. Are you willing to go kind of explore a potential partnership with them? Yes, there's no commitment I can onboard them now or have the capacity to, but I greatly appreciate those kinds of referrals and we take them very, very seriously because ultimately, yes, we serve our partners. As importantly, we serve the go to market org within our organization to actually drive more business with partners. And I think that's where it comes down to then the sales leader level is companies have many different ways of organizing go to market, and that differs by geo and region too. And so when you get down to the sales level leader or sales rep level, I think they have to honestly look at their book of business and they
mm,
have to understand what that book of business looks like. Is it aligned to a customer segment? Is it regionally aligned? Is it vertically aligned? Are there specific use cases or your product offerings they think they can sell into that segment? So, how are they orienting their book of business? And then they can apply the partner lens on top of it to say, who are the partners that can really complement my business as rep level A? And then how do I facilitate introductions to the right people at the partners so that ultimately, and I think this is where the magic happens, the rep to rep relationship between the partner and the vendor, like that's where magic is going to happen. Because if they have a relationship of trust, if they have aligned incentives, if they have overlapping accounts, now you can really go have meaningful discussions and go originate and close business together. And I think that's when you really start to see scale with the support of your sales organization.
That's such a fantastic point, Rohan, and especially the one that you mentioned towards the end, where it's magic happens when the rep to rep connection happens, and that's when the actual lift in business you can see, and all the work that we do behind the scenes, it's pretty much a pre-work in an effort to make that magic happen, the rep to rep connection. So fantastic, thanks for sharing. Now we talked about sales leadership. I just actually want to amplify that a little bit more and talk about like board level strategy and specifically channel strategy, right? Because building a channel strategy is a strategic exploration of the overall business and not just a specific market strategy, right? How do you think more partnership leaders can increase their share of voice in the boardroom during the strategic prioritization? There's tools out there, Klazar definitely helps with that, but like in your opinion and experience, what does that process look like?
Might look different for different companies. I know there's a big push towards chief partner officer now, obviously, and so there will be some partnership leaders who are fortunate enough, or depending on how they look at it, fortunate or unfortunate enough that they report directly to the CEO. So I think there's direct access, right? But probably the standard or what you typically see is partnerships reporting into the CRO. And so, one, I think you need to have very, very tight alignment with whoever you're directly reporting to. I think overall, you should not be shy to ask for opportunities to educate and engage with leadership and update them on the progress with your motion. I even look to connect with investors once every quarter and actually brief some of them who I have, some kind of prior connection with, so that they are also abreast, as the ones who are really engaging most directly with our C-suite of us being a partner org that's really results driven and the results we're driving and the challenges we're running into, but also how we plan to counteract those results. Because I think senior leaders, the thing they hate the most is surprises, right? They do not want, definitely not bad surprises, at least. So how do you get in front of that? And then I think more incrementally, I do twice a month. I send a kind of, call it a newsletter or an email update. But I really distill down like what were the top 10 things that happened across all of our motions across the org globally, and some kind of KPIs to go along with it. And I send that to all the cross functional leaders, to all of our leadership team, on a every 2 week basis. I feel like is a good repetition around that and consistently do that. And some people will read it and some people won't, but it's out there. There's nothing we're hiding behind. Happy to engage on ideas or questions on the impact or anything else. So I think that's the approach I've taken. And so I think in many ways it's akin to, the guidance you get on take charge of your own career and how do you create visibility to seniors for when it comes to things like promotions or advancement. I mean, in a sense, it's very similar in that way. I feel like with the partnerships function, because you may not naturally have that direct line, so you have to look for ways to create it.
Yeah, and then so like the thing that you mentioned, which is pretty much over communication or repeating the same message over and over again through various channels, in an effort to actually bring awareness to the situation. That's something that we've seen with our customers as well, and in the community. It's good to hear that you're seeing something similar on your side as well.
100%. 100%.
And then, Rohan, the other end of the spectrum of that question is how partnership like OKRs or results or metrics are often strongly determined by like the strategic priorities. And now I'm going to zoom down to like one specific kind of partnership, which is via the cloud marketplaces. Now, in order for any leader, any channel leader, partnership leader, alliance leader out there, how important do you think having a channel expertise is important when they are actually going and zooming into like a specific part like cloud marketplaces?
I think it is important, and this maybe aligns to expectations. It also is a question of how fast you want to move and how quickly you want to have impact, right? And I think about the Pigment situation. Probably three or four of the members of my team, and then in addition myself, all were kind of hired in parallel and joined at the same time. And I was very fortunate that they hired for experienced partnership professionals in those roles who had kind of been there, done that before. And they resource it correctly when you think about almost a full time partner ops resource from the beginning. when you think
Hmm.
about partner enablement resources from the beginning, in addition to just your typical partner management and leadership functions. And the speed that we've been able to move as a result of that foresight from our leadership, it's been just phenomenal, right? And so I think coming back to then the question of hiring for specialized skills, I think there's an element of how fast and how impactfully you want to move, and there's clearly a great benefit of doing that. But also, I would say you have to have a very thorough interview process, because at least my
Mm.
experience in partnerships is there is a quite a wide gamut of, there's some absolute rock stars who are just go 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 and know exactly how to work this stuff and have massive impact. And then there are others where you a year might go by, 2 years might go by, and you're not seeing the urgency or the impact or the determination or the right motions, and you're not getting results as a kind of function of that. And so I think you've got to go beyond the resume to really figure out if you have the right person. On the flip side, like, I own global partnerships here. Most of my experience is in consulting partnerships. So I took the lead with tech partnerships and cloud marketplace, and I had to go learn it on my own. Fortunately, I
Mm.
was afforded that space because it wasn't a top priority for year one, which allowed me the space to actually go figure it out. And it's a night and day difference what I know now from what I knew a year ago. Though I'm probably still an intermediate at best in that world. So.
That's fantastic to hear. So then, like, just as you, when you started on marketplaces, starting a new channel, which is potentially unexplored by your business, right? Your stakeholders internally, how do you think you can discover and nurture these early relationships externally as well as internally as well?
Power of the network within your organization. So I have
Mm.
our head of strategic sales has very close connections into one of the cloud marketplaces. Was fortunate enough that he made a connection there in recent weeks. Leverage your leadership and your investor network as well, right? There's so much untapped potential there. You have to be willing to explore and go ask for help. And then go do your own research, right? If you're not up to speed on something. So I read the state of the cloud marketplaces reports. I looked up competitive information on the different marketplaces. I spoke to sister companies and portfolios of our VCs who did have cloud marketplace programs, and that's how I really started to triangulate where I see the real value in this motion, short versus long term. Because at least my understanding, I think there's a clear distinction there between what you can expect short term versus the kind of polar value you might have long term in untapping their seller network.
Absolutely. All right, now switching gears just a little bit, and I want to dig deeper into your, like, journey on the marketplaces as a person who came with channel experience. What are some of the common misconceptions about cloud partnerships that you still see pertinent in today's market?
So going into it, I feel like it was a big shiny object. Oh my gosh, the Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, so many thousands of sellers, and you can tap them with Cloud Marketplace. And then when you really get down to it, it's like this many partnerships that untap their seller network, right, in mass, or get a massive pull effect from their organizations go to market. Um, where I ended up on my understanding of the value is ultimately it can be an accelerator for deal cycles. So, for thinking of sales cycle impact, it can help accelerate deal cycles because customers who already have committed spend on these marketplaces, they can draw down on that commit versus having to procure incremental budget for purchasing your company's software. I think over time you then start to unlock co-sell abilities, which is obviously great in terms of accessing varying levels of power within the organization. And then also, I think maybe this is sometimes missed, but there's a great opportunity on the renewal side to lower
Mm.
kind of cost across your CX org, or at least free up time that they spend chasing renewals and getting those dollars and all of that, and offload that to the cloud vendor. And I think in your software being wrapped up into a larger cloud commit spend, it's also less likely to get rationalized as part of cost reduction efforts. So I think there's a stickiness factor there too, and at least being able to have some impact on the risk of churn if you're actually contracted through marketplace versus not. So that's where I currently see a lot of the value for us in the near term. And then yes, of course, long term we want to get to the point of unlocking and tapping that seller network. But I think again, this comes back to expectation setting with the org. Had I expectation set that suddenly we're going to drive massive top of funnel from just signing onto a cloud marketplace, I would have set myself up for failure, right? But had to go through that due diligence to really understand where the value sits now and then be able to articulate that expectation to the organization.
Fantastic. And Rohan, we just recently did a webinar where we talked about crawl, walk, run approach of partnerships and specifically cloud partnerships. And this is exactly what we mentioned as well. So many people come to marketplaces expecting deals to flow in right the moment that you get listed, but it's far from reality. But if you did it right, like eventually that reality can become your reality, like true reality, where co-sale starts kicking in, you start getting inbound and all of that. So like fantastic. Now, Rohan, like, what would you advise a first-time partnership leader since you've done it multiple times over in different flavors? Like, what would you advise them to optimize first before everything else in terms of a cloud partnerships, which is specific, and secondly, just a generic like channel partnerships as well?
Yeah, so I mean, the guidance I'd give is one, you have to have a constant sense of discipline and focus because it's very easy to get excited about new things you can chase in the partnership world. But I think you've really got to constantly come back to what are the things that are going to drive the biggest impact to the business and what are the things that I'm being expected to drive. So maybe give a couple of examples. In a
Mm,
consulting partner motion, many organizations want to do that just so that they don't have to scale their professional services team at the same rate as the
mm,
company grows. Others say, oh, I actually want it to be a source of growth or top
mm,
of funnel for the organization as well. And then there's some who maybe just want to drive top of funnel from consulting partner motions also. And so you really have to understand what is the value your leadership and your company is expecting from this, and then align your efforts and activities to that. And so I think understanding at the top line where your product sits, what you're looking to accomplish, how mature your product is to actually be able to explore, things like technology partnerships or ISV partnerships versus say cloud marketplaces versus say SI partnerships. I think you really have to understand your product's capabilities, how easy it is to implement, or how much market demand there is for it, right? And ultimately you need to have those demand signals across different partnership channels to really figure out where to focus your time in a manner that aligns with the company's strategic priorities.
And Rohan, like last question from my side, I'll share a bit of a story between me and Brian, our head of sales. He was earlier talking about partnerships and how they are never a zero-sum game, meaning they don't both have to be equal to be successful. And at least in the earlier stages of a business, that can be a challenge, right? Because in many cases you have to give more before you can start expecting back, and that time frame can vary from 1 month, quarter, 2 quarters to a year and a half, who knows, right? It just depends on so many other factors. Now, how do you now, if given this challenge for early stage companies, how can you guide them and what can you advise them to slowly nudge towards a world where they can start taking incremental steps and move towards a world where partnership becomes a critical piece of their sales process?
Yeah, I'm happy to give you an example of this too. So you're absolutely right. It's a multi-year journey, right? Partnerships is a long game. We tell sales that all the time, and their game is a little bit more of a short-term game. It's easy to lose track of that sometimes when a partnership team has a number to chase as well and hit their KPIs on a quarterly basis. But I think to your point, you have to understand what a realistic expectation is for where you are now. So if you're an earlier stage company and you're trying to win over partners in an existing industry, you're probably going to have to feed more and get your product in their hands and get them hands on with it to one, prove to them that your product is differentiated, but
Mm,
also prove to them that your partner program is serious and is going to mature and it's something they should invest in long term. That's kind of the rite of passage, right? Then, as you do that, now your aspirations may start to change and evolve over time. But I think what's important is you set the fundamentals of what you're looking for in your program. You clearly articulate that to your partners. You clearly look for that in the partners you qualify in. And then there's an understanding of where they are today and where you need them to get over a multi year period to be a fully flourished and successful partnership. And that should inform also the requirements of how you structure your partner program. So, how much do you expect to feed partners versus how much do you expect them to source to you? And what's a
mm,
realistic expectation there? And that may change over time. So, year one, it may be for every 2 deals I feed you, bring me one back. But hey, in 3 years, we want to get to a 50-50 split. But I see that you don't really have a mature BDR or sales organization in your company. And we've actually seen some partners start to invest in sales roles where they didn't have them in the past because they know that's an expectation from us, but they also know that we're here for the long game with them. So then that investment makes sense on their part. So I think that's ultimately the trust you've got to rely on the foundation of your partnership, to have that open dialogue and to really be honest about where you are on both sides of the fence and where you need each other to be in the long run, and then work together to get there, right? So your company may have certain strengths in terms of outbounding or growth or other capabilities, and the partner has strengths in terms of their industry or use case expertise. So, are there creative ways to actually bring that together for the benefit of both parties along that journey? I think that's the general kind of mentality or approach we're taking to these things.
Fantastic, Rohan. Well, thank you so much for your time. One last question from my side before we end the podcast. Is there anything that you would like to share with our audience that I have perhaps not asked you?
Okay, I'll give you one. Maybe, what do I look for in hiring? Way less important than the resume to me is probably a handful of qualities. I
Mm,
want people with drive. I want people with curiosity and resilience. I think those are the three things I look for. Actually, I'll replace resilience with humility,
mm,
drive, humility, and curiosity. So, one, if they're humble, that is a great place to be on my team because it's a very flat, collaborative culture. We want the best ideas from across all the experience on this team. The drive, I can't create motivation in people. It's either there or not. So I don't want to be creating that. I want the people who have the inherent drive, and then the curiosity, right? To ask questions, to really think about where their partners are today and think creatively on how they help them or unlock more value in the partnership. To me, those are the three keys above all else. The rest, I feel like we can train and ramp up and work our way through.
Fantastic. I feel like Rohan, that tip will not just work for partnership, but across the board. I think it's such a good guiding principle to have. Rohan, thank you so much for your time today. It was wonderful catching up, and thanks for coming and spending time with us.
No, thank you so much, Trunal, and best of luck with the podcast. It was a great experience.